from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, and Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. Welcome. The phone number, if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. And of course, I'm pretty sure you've heard the big story today that Joe Biden has now aligned himself with President Trump. The only thing that's missing is he should be shouting, build the wall, right? Because he's absolutely taking a page out of Trump's playbook with respect to the border. Now, President Biden had a lot of things to say today, making his major announcement. But first, I want to refresh your memory a little bit because it was not that long ago that Joe Barboso Biden and his band of merry men in Washington and women like KJP, it wasn't that long ago that they were all saying, look, we can't take executive action. We can't act on this unilaterally. Congress has to do it. We need the money. This is Congress's fault. This does not stop at the president's desk. The buck does not stop with Joe Barboso Biden, and we must get Congress to take action. Meanwhile, Joe Barboso Biden was pounding his chest saying the border is secure, right? Mayorkas said the border is secure. Kamala Harris, que mala eres. She said the border is secure. Yet the border wasn't really secure. And we know that because today Biden said we're going to secure the border. Listen to this montage.
The border is closed. The border is secure. The border is secure. The border is closed. The border is secure. And the border is not open.
We have a secure border.
I can tell you the border is secure.
By what measure is it secure now, sir?
So there is not a common definition.
The president has done more to secure the border and to deal with this issue of immigration than anybody else. He really has.
We're certainly doing a lot more to secure the border.
As you know, the president has done everything that he can.
As you know, the president has done everything that he can. Well, that's funny because I think at the time, I know I wasn't the only voice shouting on these airwaves, but I was saying that's a lie because Joe Barboso Biden can shut down the border. He can use the military. He can use executive action. He can just allow the border agents who he's turned into travel agents to do their jobs. But none of that was happening. Well, today he waltzes out there to give a new speech, singing a new tune. Listen to this.
So today, I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can on my own to address the border. Frankly, I would have preferred to address this issue through bipartisan legislation because that's the only way to actually get the kind of system we have now that's broken, fixed.
Now, that's not the only way. He says that's the only way to address this problem. It's not the only way to address the problem. Obviously, he's addressing the problem on his own. His words, not mine. Go ahead.
Patrol agents, more asylum officers, more judges. But Republicans have left me no choice. Today, I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. Migrants will be restricted.
Unlawfully. I think when you say unlawfully, that means not legal, which would mean that they're illegal aliens. Right? Because there's always this big talk. No, they're undocumented. They're asylum seekers. No, they're unlawfully entering the country because they're illegally immigrating into the country. Right? Let's stop splitting hairs here because I think we've had enough of that. Go ahead.
From receiving asylum at our southern border unless they seek it after entering through an established lawful process. And those who seek to come to the United States legally, for example, by making an appointment and coming to a port of entry, asylum will still be available to them, still available. But if an individual chooses not to use our legal pathways, if they choose to come without permission and against the law,
illegally,
they'll be restricted from receiving asylum and staying in the United States. This action will help us gain control of our border, restore order into the process.
This action will help us gain control of our border and restore order in the process. And that's funny, because I think Mayorkas and Kamala Harris and Karine Jean-Pierre and Joel Barboso Biden, they all said that the border was secure and that there was order. Isn't that interesting how that they said, no, we have operational control of the border. But meanwhile, Biden, the president of the United States, is saying this action will help us gain control of our border and restore order into the process. I got to tell you, this is playing right into El Trompito's hand, right? What he should do, if I were Trump, I'd do a rally outside the White House today, maybe at night, and shout, build the wall, build the wall. And then, play a little joke and be like, oh, no, Joe's going to do it. He's going to take care of it. He's going to shut down the border, because that's exactly what Joe Biden's doing. Now, he doesn't stop there. There's a few more clips. We may not play them all. I'll leave some for a little bit later so we could talk about this some more. But it's very, very interesting to see how this whole thing plays out, because cut number 5, he goes on to say that some people think that what he's doing is too strict and we have to be patient. Be patient till what? Election day? I find it so funny, and I'm happy it's happening, but I find it funny because the whole thing is silly in my estimation. Listen to this.
For those who say the steps I've taken are too strict, I say to you that be patient, and goodwill of the American people are wearing thin right now. Doing nothing is not an option. We have to act. We must act consistent with both our law and our values as Americans. I'll take these steps today, not to walk away from who we are as Americans.
You should walk away from the White House.
To make sure we preserve who we are for future generations to come.
Now, not to be left behind, El Trompito, Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States, he decides to weigh in on this, and he says that Biden's pathetic executive order won't stop the invasion. It'll make it worse. Listen to this.
Millions of people have poured into our country, and now, after nearly 4 years of his failed, weak leadership, pathetic leadership, crooked Joe Biden is pretending to finally do something about the border. But in fact, it's all about show, because he knows we have a debate coming up in 3 weeks. The truth is that Joe Biden's executive order won't stop the invasion. It's weak and it's pathetic. It will actually make the invasion worse. Millions of people a year will continue to pour across our border and be released into our country. And we recently learned Biden is secretly granting mass amnesty to hundreds of thousands of these illegal aliens, along with welfare, government benefits, work permits, and jobs. He's not doing that, however, for our veterans.
He's not doing it for the homeless. He's giving illegal aliens far more than he's giving anybody else. El Trompito is right here. That's why they're allowing up to 20 million people since he took office. And that's what Trump said. And I think he's 100% right. Now, I want to get to the bottom of this and whether Trump will be able to govern effectively if he gets locked up. RNC Chair Michael Whatley joins us coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back, amigos, and we continue our discussion. I want to get into some of these headlines out there. The Hill reporting the RNC is planning for the possibility of Trump being jailed, and I want to get that straight from the source. RNC Chair Michael Whatley, welcome to the program, sir.
It's good to be with you. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. It's a crazy time to see some of these crazy headlines, but outside of that, all is well. Congratulations on your new position, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a heck of a time, and it's a heck of an opportunity. I think that when President Trump called and said, need you to step up and do this, the first thought is, it's a big undertaking, but it is so absolutely important for the country. we have got to get this done.
Amen to that. Now, I'm looking at reports in Media-Eye, reports from Newsmax, reports all over the place saying that the RNC is having all options on the table, prepared for Trump to address the RNC convention from prison. Tell us more.
Well, look, I think that, we don't necessarily expect that he is going to have to do this from prison. But the fact is that he is our nominee. And we are going to do whatever we need to do to let him accept that nomination when we go into Milwaukee, July 15 through 18. So, we have to consider all options. We've got to put all options on the table and kind of see what it is that the court is going to allow us to do. But, I fully hope that he's going to be able to be there in person and accept the nomination.
Mr. Chairman, did you expect the fundraising haul for May or any of the I'm going to say they were surprises to me. I knew that there would be a bump, but I didn't think it would be that big following the guilty verdict last week?
Very pleasantly surprised. I think, that the coolest thing, and look, there's nothing that you can say about $141 million that we were able to bring in for the month of May. It's just absolutely staggering. But I think the thing that impressed me the most was that we had 2 million individual donors, and 30% of those were first-time donors to any political candidate. So 200,000 plus people who've never given in a presidential, let alone any other race, that said, okay, I'm outraged. This is wrong, and I'm going to go ahead and support President Trump. Average donation, $70. And we had donations come in from all 50 states. I think it's just a true testament to the fact that the American people see through this trial. They understand that Joe Biden and his allies have weaponized the judiciary to go after President Trump in a way that we have never seen here in America before, and we can't take 4 more years of it.
Folks, we're on with Michael Whatley, co-chair of the RNC, along with Lara Trump. And Chairman Whatley, I think it's a fantastic time to become chair, right? You walk right into this very exciting time, and there's tons of fundraising going on, but it's not without its challenges. Let the listeners know some of the challenges that you're facing in coalescing the party and moving forward.
Well, the nice thing that we got when it comes to coalescing the party is Donald Trump won. He won early. He actually cleared the field and became our presumptive nominee earlier than anybody has ever done it in the party in a contested primary, which gives us so much more time to kind of pull everybody back together. And so, we're still several weeks out from our convention, and we know who the nominee is going to be. We're working with him. We've signed a joint finance committee, but there are always going to be questions about, can you get, 100% of the party behind him? And we're at 95%. I think the biggest challenges that we face right now are structural in that this is a divided country. We have a 1-seat Republican majority in the House. There's a 1-seat majority in the Senate for the Democrats. In the presidential cycles, in the last 2 cycles, have been absolutely razor thin. In fact, 44,000 votes decided the election in 3 different states in the last election. And, it's going to come down to 7 to 10 states this cycle. Each one of those states is going to come down to a point or 2. And so we really need to make sure that everything that we do at the RNC is focused on winning. We can't afford to be all things to all people. And that was one of the things that I told the president when we talked about the plan and how we're going to win this thing is, the RNC has a tendency towards mission creep. Just, you always have, good people who want help, and you want to help everybody that you can. But you know what? We can't play in states like Oregon or Oklahoma. We can't play in South Carolina. We can't play in Connecticut. What we need to do is focus on the states that are going to determine whether we have a Republican president or a Democratic president. And so we're going to strip everything down that we're doing to our core functions, and we're going to get out the vote. We're going to protect the ballot. And I think that culture change that we've introduced here at the RNC took a little bit of time, took a lot of conversations, with folks who said, well, this isn't how we've always done it. And you know what? We don't need to focus on how we've always done it. We need to focus on what's going to win.
Yeah, that hasn't always worked anyway. I agree with that. Chairman Whatley, you said something I think that is really important, and I know the listeners of this program are very into getting as much information as they can on that, and that's protecting the ballot. I know there were initiatives in various states. We've seen things in Wisconsin. We've seen things in Pennsylvania to protect the integrity of the election. Tell us, I guess from a more global perspective as chair, what's changed and what still needs to happen?
Good. So I'm going to tell you three things. The first is what needs to happen before votes start being cast, right? And we need in every one of our states a common set of rules and laws and regulations that are going to ensure that the elections are going to be fair and accurate, secure and transparent. Things like only American citizens can vote, like you have to have a voter ID. That we want states to clean up their voter rolls so they're not sending out mail-in ballots to people who shouldn't be getting them. When we've got 46 states that do some sort of mail-in voting or absentee voting, that you need protections on those, right? You have to have a signature. You have to have a witness. You have to have those ballots turned in by Election Day. You can't just put them in a drop box. They've got to go in the mail. These are things that are supported by 75% of all the voters all across the country. We keep telling everybody we're not election deniers, we're election winners, right? We really want to make sure that we have the rules of the road set up the right way. And so we're working with governors, we're working with legislators, we're working with regulators, and by regulators, boards of elections or secretaries of state to try and get these put into place. And if the folks in these states won't work with us, we're going to file a lawsuit, right? So we've already filed 85 lawsuits in 25 states to try and make sure that we're going to have fair rules that are going to govern the elections in these states. The second thing I'm going to tell you is that you have to be in the room. You got to be in the room when the votes are being cast. You got to be in the room when the votes are being counted. And I think it's absolutely critical for us to do recruiting of volunteers and attorneys. So we've got an initiative right now at the RNC where we're going to recruit 100,000 volunteers all across the country to serve as poll workers and poll observers. It's critical for us to have those folks in the room. And then in every one of our battleground states, we're recruiting a minimum of 500 attorneys that we're going to have who are there to make sure if anything goes wrong, we've got attorneys that are going to be on site very rapidly and going to be able to help us work through those types of issues. So those are the biggest two operational things, what happens before the vote and then what happens when people are voting and when the votes are being counted. The third thing I'm going to mention is protectthevote.com. Protectthevote.com is a website that we have set up at the RNC, and we would ask every single one of your listeners to go to that site and sign up, and it will put them in touch with our state parties and our federal teams, and we're going to make sure that we train them and we deploy them to help on our ballot protection team.
All right, folks, we're on with Chairman Michael Whatley. Coming right back. Don't move a muscle.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our discussion with Republican National Committee Chair Michael Whatley. And Mr. Chairman, the aforementioned website, again, is protectthevote.com, protectthevote.com. I want to get your take on this executive order that Joe Biden's put out there, because, of course, in addition to the apparatus and protecting the ballot and the get out the vote effort, we have to have a handle on the issues. And it seems to me that immigration might be the biggest issue, followed by inflation and the economy. Biden says that he's going to be securing the border by allowing in 2,500 illegal immigrants per day. Your thoughts?
Look, it is too little and it is too late. It is absolutely stunning to me that this guy took 94 executive actions right when they got in. You actually had Secretary Mayorkas bragging about, we have overturned so many of the protections that President Trump put in place, it'll take us forever to even lay them out and talk about them, right? So 94 different executive actions that they took to throw the border wide open. You know, a lot of people, I think, have mischaracterized this as saying the president made a mistake. The president was looking the other way. The president, didn't know. That's absolutely wrong. This president intentionally opened the borders and told everybody in South America and Central America and all around the world, bring them on. We're going to let everybody through the border. They intentionally let 10 million plus illegal immigrants come across our southern border. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are, and we don't know what they're doing. So for him to finally realize, oh, crap, this is bad. It's an issue for me politically. I'm going to issue an executive order. The guy for the last 6 months has said he didn't have the authority to do this by executive order. He said you have to pass a bill through Congress, which was going to make it even worse, but you had to pass legislation. I don't have authority to do anything by executive order. And then he shows up and says, well, I'm going to actually pass an executive order. And it's not just any executive order. It's an executive order that actually is going to continue to allow millions of illegal immigrants to come across the border every single year. And it's going to basically say that any of the children, unaccompanied minors, are going to be brought across, that they're going to have an online app for people to sign up to come across the border for parole. I mean, how in the world is this going to make it better? I mean, the fact is that Joe Biden, through executive order, threw that door open. And right now, this is political window dressing. I think it insults everybody who is concerned about this particular issue set. And we're not going to be able to protect the border until we have Donald Trump back in office. And he has been very clear. On day one, he's going to do two things. He's going to unleash American energy, and he is going to shut the border.
RNC Chairman Michael Whatley is our guest. And, Mr. Chair, I agree with everything you said about this executive order that Biden's put into place that goes into effect midnight tonight, I guess, or midnight tomorrow. Midnight tonight, 12:01 Wednesday. And what I find so interesting about this is that he is, in effect, trying to slow down what's happening at the border while still allowing it to happen. And like many Democrats, trying to be all things to all people. But what I find interesting here is if this has a dramatic effect on immigration at the border, I think this plays straight into Trump's hands, where it's only going to strengthen Trump's position, where he's trying to draw that contrast between him and Biden, the open borders crowd. I think Biden's going to help strengthen that contrast. What do you think?
I could not agree more. I mean, the fact that he is now saying, oh, yeah, I do have executive authority, just shows you that he's been lying for 4 years on this issue.
Right.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing to me that the press has given him a free pass on the issue of immigration. And the number of people who have said, oh, he's looking the other way, or, oh, he's not paying attention, are just getting this wrong. This is very, very intentional. He wanted these people here. He wanted 10 million illegal immigrants to come across that southern border. I've got an event coming up in Michigan. We were talking with the new chair up there, Pete Hoekstra, who's a great state party chair, and was telling me 1.2% of all Michigan residents right now are illegal immigrants. Think about that.
That's crazy. I know when I heard the number of the amount of people that are in the country, it's larger than the population of something like 30 states. And I was amazed by this number. And I've long thought at some point Biden has to turn off the spigot. And I didn't know what that number was. I guess now he knows what it is, and he's doing it now. I don't know if it's political because the election is right around the corner, or if it's because he's finally hit his number and he thinks, whatever it is they're going to do, register them to vote, get them driver's licenses, whatever it is, he feels he can do it. Do you have any speculation on that?
Oh, I think it's absolutely political. I think this guy has absolutely intended to throw that border open and invite these people in for 4 years. I think the fact that it is the number one issue in this election, other than maybe the weaponization of the judiciary, other than maybe inflation, it is certainly one of the top three issues that we're seeing right now, is the only reason that he's trying to tack back to the center, but he's doing it 5 months out from the election. I mean, this guy can't even get his political calculus right in order to make this change a year ago or 2 years ago when it could actually resonate with the American voters that he, was going in a different direction.
Now, this seems to be the Band-Aid that he's trying to use for the border. Last week, he had another Band-Aid, as I'm going to call it, to release 1 million barrels of oil from one of the reserves. I suspect that he's going to do that again to try and affect gas prices so that he can kind of, waltz into November saying, the border's under control, gasoline prices are dropping, we're the best we've ever been, some sort of speech like that. What do you know about that, and what can you add?
Well, what I would say is this, that if he had not killed the Keystone XL pipeline, we would have 830,000 barrels of oil coming into the United States right now that would go into our Houston refineries and would have a substantial impact on gasoline prices all across the country. This guy has attacked energy since day one. His team was actually celebrating the fact that gasoline prices were going so high that people were using less gas, and it was helping the environment. They were bragging about it. And now all of a sudden the high gas prices are hurting him at the polls, and he is going to take oil out of our strategic petroleum reserve, and he's going to increase imports from Russia, Venezuela, and OPEC. It is absolutely mind-boggling that his energy policy is we're going to enrich places like Iran and Russia by buying their oil and driving up world oil prices, and not going to drill here. He's not going to help the American economy, and they think that this is a good thing.
RNC Chair Michael Whatley, lastly, you're talking about some of the international folks. Looking at what Biden and his crew have done internationally has boggled the minds of many, and the level of instability that we see in Europe and in the Middle East and even in Asia to some degree, I think can all be blamed unilaterally on Joe Biden. What are your thoughts on how that's going to impact him in this upcoming election?
When you think about it, 4 years ago, Russia was in check, China was in check, and Iran was in check, right? And we had the world was under American leadership a much safer place than we are today. Now we've got China completely surrounding Taiwan with military exercises. They're licking their lips over a second Biden term when they can just go ahead and invade Taiwan. We've seen Russia invade Ukraine. We've seen Iran openly attack Israel for the first time in the history of the country. And the Middle East is absolutely on fire. I mean, there's not a single thing around the world that is better with Joe Biden as president. Peace through strength is not just a pithy campaign slogan from Ronald Reagan. It's a fact. And America is weak. The world is a far more dangerous place. We need to return strength to the American foreign policy, and we need to make sure that America is going to be that leader in the world, and that's not going to happen with Joe Biden. I think that, we really, truly, looking at the safety and security of this country, are in a much more dangerous place than we were 4 years ago.
Chairman Michael Whatley, for those that are listening and want to make a donation and support the work of the RNC and what you're doing to get President Trump reelected, where do you instruct them to go? How do they do it?
Good. GOP.com is the place, and we would be more than happy to get that support. But I would also encourage your listeners, in addition to going to protectthevote.com, go to Trump Force 47, which is a brand new website that we just launched this week with the Trump campaign. And it is a one-stop portal for people to volunteer and to help us get out the vote and help us make sure that we win this election.
So we've got protectthevote.com, TrumpForce47.com, and GOP.com. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
There's a lot of .coms to visit, folks. Make sure you show some support and some love. Chairman Michael Whatley, again, congratulations. You got your work cut out for you, but you seem to be kicking butt and taking names. Godspeed, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
You bet. Folks, more to come straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back. Amigos, we continue our conversation. Again, if you want to get in on the conversation, 833-482-5337. I'll be doing calls in this segment and the next segment. But first, I want to pick up where I left off because Joe El Baboso Biden was going on and on and on. And that wasn't the end of it, right? There were some other hearings that went on in Washington today. Good old Merrick Garland was out there, and he had a lot to say. Let me see which one I want to pick. He refuses to give any of the audio from the Her investigation. They've given the transcript. And I think what's important is you want to get the context, right? You lose a lot with just a transcript, right? If I say, well, I don't know. Sometimes I've got half a mind to kill that guy. I might be joking, but you wouldn't get that if you're reading a transcript of it, right? So I think, the audio, if it's available, why not? They should definitely provide that. They've already provided the transcript. Makes no sense why they wouldn't. But what's also interesting is Merrick Garland today officially denouncing, putting to bed, and squashing any idea that the Department of Justice had anything to do with the Trump non-disclosure agreement trial in New York City. This is number 11. Listen to Merrick Garland.
It comes alongside threats to defund particular department investigations, most recently the special counsel's prosecution of the former president. It comes alongside false claims that a jury verdict in a state trial brought by a local district attorney was somehow controlled by the Justice Department. That conspiracy theory is an attack on the judicial process itself. It comes as individual career agents and prosecutors have been singled out just for doing their jobs. It comes as baseless and extremely dangerous falsehoods are being spread about the FBI's law enforcement operations. And it comes at a time when we are seeing heinous threats of violence being directed at the Justice Department's career civil servants. These repeated attacks on the Justice Department are unprecedented and they are unfounded. These attacks have not and they will not influence our decision making.
So Merrick Garland, again, on his high horse at the hearing today, saying this is not going to do anything. This is not how it goes down. Yada, 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 yada. I don't know who believes him. I think there's probably a handful of people that do because I think there's a lot of people that are just good-hearted people. And good-hearted people want to believe the best in everything and in everyone. They want to think, hey, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Look, this guy's director of the attorney general at the Department of Justice. We got to give him a fair chance here. This guy's not a clown. At least most people want to think that. Now, I tend to disagree with that, and I think every time he walks out, they should play right. But that's the case. So now, Garland was on the hot seat today, and not only does he, reiterate that we've had nothing to do with El Trompito in New York City on the non-disclosure agreement case, but Jack Smith didn't tamper with any of the Mar-a-Lago documents. Now, what's interesting here, and he goes into this back and forth with Jim Jordan on whether or not they did and did not, make the evidence look a certain way. This is Garland doing what he does best. Nope, not true. Simply not true. as if we're supposed to believe that the way that these things were photographed was the way that they were found in Mar-a-Lago, when we know that cover sheets were added. Right? Those cover sheets, I think they were like red or orange that said classified or top secret. Those were all added, and they brought one for like every page in every folder. So it made it look like it was a lot more. Now, so when Garland says that they didn't tamper with it, they're going to say, oh, it's not tampering, that's photographing. You know, taking a picture of the evidence isn't tampering. Come on, guys. So we're going to get into that straight ahead. And, of course, your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Do you regret picking him?
No, I do not regret picking him.
Well, prosecutors aren't supposed to tamper with evidence, and it looks like that's what he did. He changed the sequence of the documents that he seized from Mar-a-Lago.
I'm sorry, that's a false characterization, but that is ongoing.
Here's what he said to the court, Mr. Attorney General. There are some boxes where the order of items within the box is not the same as in the associated scans. I mean, he said it. I didn't say it. He told the court that.
Now you're asking me to comment on a discovery dispute that's ongoing in a court. I don't know the facts of it, and I'm not going to comment on it.
No, this is from Jack Smith filing with the court. He admitted to the court that they tampered with the evidence. He mishandled the very documents he's charging President Trump with mishandling. And I'm just asking, do you regret picking this guy as the special counsel in the most important special counsel investigation probably in American history?
I'm sorry, I did not hear the words tamper in the statement that Mr. Smith filed. He did not use those words.
Well, let me ask it this way. Are you supposed to change the order of the documents that you seize, and the physical documents don't match up with the scanned documents? Are you supposed to do that as a prosecutor?
This is a matter in dispute, in discovery in that court, and I'm going to leave it for the district court to make a determination after.
I would just say one last thing. It's not in dispute. This is what he said in the court filing. Jack Smith's team said that to the judge in the court. By the way, this case is now basically on hold because they've screwed up so many things.
Again, I don't know whether your description of the facts are true or not true, and I'm not going to intrude in a decision in a district court.
There's Attorney General Merrick Garland, like the swamp creature that he is. He's slippery. You can't nail him down for nothing. He's so full of it. But kudos to Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, for doing such a good job in bringing this stuff to light. And that is, in fact, the case, right? They have Jack Smith's statement to the court. We've seen the photos. They're incredibly staged. Right? Who in their right mind keeps classified documents in their home in the manner that they were photographed? It just doesn't happen. They were disheveled. They were thrown about. And they did that to make it look like that's how Trump keeps them, including stacking them in the bathroom and then saying, oh, that's where he keeps them. He keeps his documents in his bathroom. Come on. The whole thing is fake. It's phony and it's fraud. And when you call him out, he says, well, I can't say that. Well, I didn't hear the word this. Well, I didn't do that. Come on, brother. Merrick Garland, you are doing a very, very poor job here. Anyway, there's more Merrick Garland. We had Matt Gaetz ripping him up and others. I'm going to get to that in a little bit as well. Plus, we'll do some calls in Open Phone America. But before we get into that, I got a couple of interesting topics that I want to discuss with you guys because, A, we've got Fauci, right? There's still some reaction to Fauci. And B, we've got social media still influencing the health of teenagers. I want to get into that as well. 833-482-5337. Don't go anywhere, folks. Hour number 2 is coming right up. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program, hour number two. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And what we're going to talk about now, I want to pick up where I left yesterday. Yesterday, I gave some commentary on my thoughts on Fauci and his testimony, but there was a lot of things that were said, a lot of questions that were asked. We only kind of got into a little bit of it yesterday, and I want to get into a little bit more of that because I think it's worthy of that. Yesterday, Fauci was kind of obfuscating, saying that it was a complicated issue when asked about why Americans were led to believe that the vaccine would stop transmission when in fact it was just making it non-lethal when you actually got the virus, but you were still going to get it, and it was herd immunity that, if anything, that was making the less people sick, and stopping the transmission because people had developed some immunity. The question was, how long did that immunity last? At least that was my understanding of it. Then we heard Dr. Fauci say that the objection to the vaccines were ideological BS. And he went on. He went on to continue to talk about herd immunity, saying that it was very elusive. Listen to this exchange between Congresswoman Jill Tokuda from Hawaii.
Dr. Fauci, what percentage of the population did we estimate needed to be infected with COVID before we would achieve so-called herd immunity?
Herd immunity was very elusive with COVID, and the Great Barrington Declaration was flawed both conceptually and in practice. Conceptually, that you could shield vulnerable people as if the only vulnerable people are those in nursing homes. We have tens and tens of millions of vulnerable people that you couldn't possibly shield. People with underlying conditions, the elderly, those would be the individuals. So it would be conceptually impossible to do that. Herd immunity, as we know, means if you have a virus that doesn't change and a virus in which when you get infected or vaccinated, you have highly durable, perhaps lifelong immunity. That's not the case with COVID. We know immunity wanes and we have multiple variants. So in practical purposes, the Great Barrington Declaration was invalid, both conceptually and practically.
Now, previous guest of ours, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, authored, at least in part, the Great Barrington Declaration, and made a lot of sense to me. But Fauci went on to now blame the unvaccinated for killing 200,000 to 300,000 people in the U.S. Listen to this.
Do you think the American public should listen to America's brightest and best doctors and scientists, or instead listen to podcasters, conspiracy theorists, and unhinged Facebook memes?
Listening to people who you just described is going to do nothing but harm people because they will deprive themselves of life-saving interventions, which has happened. And some have done studies. Peter Hotez has done an analysis of this and shows that in people who refuse to get vaccinated for any variety of reasons, probably responsible for an additional 200,000 to 300,000 deaths in this country.
Now, I want to get some reaction to some of this audio that we've heard, and we've got more audio out there. But Dr. Stephen Quay has been on this program before. He is a scientist, a physician, and an author. He's the author of the book, Stay Safe, A Physician's Guide to Survive Coronavirus. And he has railed against the practice known as gain-of-function research. Dr. Quay, welcome back. What are your thoughts on Dr. Fauci saying 200,000 to 300,000 people in the U.S. are dead because they listen to podcasts?
Hi, Rich. It's great to be back here. So it's really hard to describe the lack of evidence-based testimony that happened yesterday in the Congress. But nonetheless, there's no evidence that is the case. we do know that people who got infected with SARS-CoV-2 had antibodies not only to the spike protein, but to two other very important proteins that are in the virus, but not in the vaccine. And so we have Dr. Fauci and all virologists from, the last 100 years saying a natural infection is going to be better than a vaccination, suddenly flipping that on its head during this particular process and saying, well, no, the vaccination is going to be highly superior to an actual infection. And that is just wrong. And they're driven by desires to perhaps increase vaccination, numbers or that sort of thing. But these people are not stupid, and you need to treat them with the respect they have. Tell them the truth, let them make their own decisions, and things will work out better than they did.
I agree with that statement, and I think it was a generous one. Now, Dr. Quay, and you're in this field, I'm not. Is Fauci just an evil scientist that wants to just lie to everybody, or is there a financial gain? Why do you think he, did this about face from what he was originally saying about herd immunity?
I believe what they have said is that, and Collins has been a little more forthcoming. He was head of NIH, and was effectively Fauci's boss. But I think what they effectively were doing was saying, hey, we will say anything to try to maximize vaccination rates, even if they have to be lies, even if they have to be white lies, even if they have to be big lies. And that was their policy process. And that always is going to come back to bite them. And it took a while, but it eventually does. And now the entire enterprise is tainted by the fact of wondering if you can believe what they tell you. Because once somebody tells you two or three lies, the next time they say something, you're going to say, I'm not going to listen to you. So they did more damage than necessary. Sweden effectively did, without calling it the Barrington Declaration, they effectively did what was described there. Was they sort of highly protected the nursing homes and the elderly and people with pre-existing conditions. They kind of let people pick their own natural responses. So if you had a fever or sniffles, you would stay home. You didn't have to be told to stay home, for God's sakes. If you felt okay, you'd go to restaurants, you'd go outside. And they had the lowest rate of death and hospitalization of any Scandinavian countries. The other Scandinavian countries did more of what the U.S. tried to do, which is lock everybody down, which in fact increases transmission, because if you have an 85% chance of catching it if you're in a building with someone else because of the indoor air issue. So there's a lot of misinformation that continues to be propagated, and now it's being propagated in the context of, well, I can't change my mind with new evidence because then it would mean that I was wrong in the first place. But that's what scientists do. We're wrong all the time. That's how we learn. You make a hypothesis, you test it. If you're right, you move. You go on. If you're wrong, you admit it. You move on. I mean, that's progress.
Folks, we're on with Dr. Stephen Quay. He's a medical doctor. He's got a PhD. He's a scientist, and he's the founder of Atossa Therapeutics. And Dr. Quay knows what he's talking about. He's got an MD and a PhD from the University of Michigan. And he did his postdoctoral work in the chemistry department at MIT with a Nobel laureate. He was also a resident at Harvard, or at the Harvard MGH Hospital, and spent almost a decade on the faculty of Stanford University School of Medicine. He also has invented 7 FDA-approved pharmaceuticals, holds 88 patents, and has helped over 80 million people with these medicines. So, Dr. Quay, I wanted to share your credentials with the audience again so that they would know that you're not just a nutty professor, right? You're the real deal. You understand this like no one else. And when Dr. Fauci tries to pull a fast one on me, shame on him. But when he tries to pull a fast one on you, it's not really happening. And there's all this talk about people holding patents. And I honestly, I'm happy if you make a bunch of money when you've invented medicine. That's fantastic. I think a lot of people aren't so happy when that happens to people that work in the government because there's this presumption that they're serving the public. What are your thoughts?
That's an interesting one. It's an ethical one. There are provisions in most employment processes in NIH and other government scientific positions for the scientists to share in the fruits of some of that work. I think you can make an equal argument that it's all paid for by taxpayer dollars, and therefore all of it should accrue back to the taxpayers. Kind of cuts both ways. You probably don't. You can get some. You probably have a different quality scientist if there is no, economic benefit inside the government. But it's a fine line. The NIH does fund a lot of research that ends up in medicines. I do think that we're not probably balancing the government NIH-funded research that leads to drugs versus what the pharmaceuticals contribute. And when I started inventing drugs in the 80s, if we charged $1,000, $2,000 a year per patient for a drug, so $3 to $6, $10 a day, that was a comfortable spot now. And I am amazed at some of my other colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry who can charge $100,000 a month or even more for some of these cancer drugs. So I have trouble with that on a sort of an ethical basis as a doctor, as a physician. But I'm a CEO of a company, but I don't think I'm going to go to that level with the drugs that we're under development in breast cancer.
All right, makes sense. I could see that perspective, and I also agree that you're right. You probably won't get the same quality of scientists. I'm just wondering does that mean for the government to be competitive in getting the best scientists, do they have to cut people in on it? Or does that mean that we should just have the government out of that business and maybe funding? But again, I don't know enough about it to really make that determination. But when we come back, I want to get your take. If you could stick around, I want to ask you to react to Dr. Fauci's response to the NIH not providing any funding for gain-of-function research. And I know you've been outspoken on that in the past. So, folks, we're coming right back with Dr. Stephen Quay, medical doctor, PhD scientist. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
How can you definitively say that the NIH did not fund the dangerous gain-of-function research?
I go back to what I said, that the gain-of-function research by the operative and regulatory definition of P3CO does not include at all the viruses that were studied under the subaward.
How do you know that, sir, if there was no lab books, nothing from China?
We know what viruses they were studying.
How? How do you know? You never went there.
I'm telling you that the NIH funded research on these viruses. If someone else somewhere in China was doing something else,
well, and that's the problem, because NIH didn't go there. You didn't get the reports that were needed. How in the world would you know? I'm going to go on to the next question.
And you're not hearing what I'm saying.
That is Congresswoman Debbie Lesko from Arizona grilling Dr. Fauci, where we know that the Echo Health Alliance received a grant from the NIH that did, in fact, fund the gain-of-function research. But Fauci continues to stick with his story that it wasn't him per se. It was him through a middleman, a money launderer, if you will. I want to welcome back our guest, Dr. Stephen Quay. Dr. Quay, what are your thoughts on this portion of the testimony?
So, I mean, I think what is being missing, again, these people, Dr. Fauci doesn't explain things well at all. The regulatory framework of gain of function, as he described it, had a hole big enough to drive 50 Mack trucks through it. The hole is the following. if you start with a virus that does not infect humans and you turn it into a virus that does infect humans, by their regulatory definition, that is not gain of function. You have to start with a human virus and change it in some way to have it continue to be a human virus. To me, it's the most ridiculous regulatory loophole that was created, I want to say on purpose. I don't know that for fact, but it sure looks like it was created on purpose to give them, they could do anything they want. So he is correct that from the legal point of view, they started with a bat virus and they made a human virus out of it, but my goodness, it infected 2 billion people. That's what you call gain of function in any man's world.
Wow. Now, Dr. Stephen Quay, there is... because of things like this, I think there's a different view today of public health than there was, I don't know, say 2019. And I don't know if it's gotten better or worse since 2020, but I want you to hear Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. She was on CNN yesterday, and she was harping on the lack of trust in public health and how it threatens America. And I tend to think that there's some truth in that statement. Listen to this.
What I'm concerned about is how people don't trust public health at the local level, at the state level, and the national level. People don't want to go into public health. They're afraid of it. They're afraid of the tax, the hate, the division that's out there. And yet it is public health that keeps us safe. And, when COVID started, we didn't have a lot of answers. We're investigating a lot of things. I want to make it clear, Dr. Fauci told me back then and has, over the course of these years, always said, we don't know where it came from. He was open to a lab leak, could have come from animals. It was the Trump administration that didn't push China to let us in when we should have been allowed in that country to figure out what was going to happen. Public health matters to all of us. We almost eradicated smallpox, polio, measles. Now we have measles in Michigan because people won't get immunized. People's lack of trust in public health officials is scary and threatening to this country.
Now, I agree that having a lack of trust in public health can be a threat in some way. But I have to also agree with the people who aren't trusting public health when you have guys like Fauci out there, giving these stories with holes in them and conducting themselves like gangsters instead of like scientists, Doc.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, and this is going to be a personal perspective on this whole situation but your health is best handled in the one-on-one relationship you have with a healthcare provider, doctor, nurse, whatever you do. And that private relationship, as it were, is the best place for you to make decisions about whether you should get vaccinated, whether you should take a medicine, whether you should do something else. As soon as you elevate the process and the recommendations or the mandates, for God's sakes, out of that one-on-one relationship, you are degrading the process because one size does not fit all in medicine.
Dr. Stephen Quay is the author of the book. Hold on, I'll give you the title. Stay safe. Make sure you get a copy on Amazon.com. Doc, I want to thank you for all of your insight and everything else that you've done for us tonight.
Thank you, Rich. It's great speaking to you and your listeners.
Likewise. All right, folks, we're coming right back. We're going to talk about more public health. This time, what is going on with the mental health of teenagers? Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. I want to get to a couple of your calls before we get into our next topic. And let me see, where do we go? Let's start with Janice, New Orleans, Louisiana, listening online to KLIF out of Texas. Janice, welcome. How are you?
How are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
Good. I really enjoy your show so very much, Mr.
Thank
Valdez. Now, I wanted to say Biden, I don't know. He's trying to get people on his side and everything. But here's the thing. You're going to close the border. It would be like me closing my front door, locking my house, and let's say, like, I close it from Monday to Friday. But then on Saturday, I open the door, and I let some strangers through, and then Monday I close it again. I mean, this is not going to solve anything whatsoever. These people, none of them should ever be coming into this country in this manner. There are people that are dying. I tried to explain this to someone the other day, and he really let into me. Mm-hmm. I was saying that Joe Biden is indirectly responsible for people's deaths, and he is, by having that border open. There was a woman in my state that was killed, Lake and Riley, of course. Then there was a woman and her son, drunken driver. Then there was a little girl just recently, South Carolina, a 3-year-old. She was killed. And he is indirectly responsible for these deaths, and I think that he should go to jail. And then this other Carl person, the show I was on, he's trying to tell me how, you care more about the people that are killed by illegals than you do about the people who are murdered by people in our country. I said, no. I said, I care about each and every person. No one should be killed.
Yeah, Janice, I think you make a good point there, and that's kind of what the president said at the State of the Union address, which was, how about the people who are killed by the illegals, and which is also a problem. I don't want to make it sound like it's not, but the reality is, if we already have problems on our hands. We don't need to add more problems, and I think that's exactly what's happening. And you're right, nobody should die at the hands of an illegal alien, let alone anyone else. But definitely not at the hands of an illegal alien, somebody that's allegedly coming here for a better way, a better life, a better opportunity. So I agree with you. Biden should be held responsible. But the issue is, Trump was right when he said he has presidential immunity, and I'm sure the Supreme Court's going to uphold that. And when you do things in the commission of your job, just like cops, if they perform CPR and they break your rib, they should not get sued. Biden's got that same kind of qualified immunity protection where he can be like, hey, look, I was stupid as a politician. I made bad policy decisions, and people were hurt as a result of my decisions. But he's protected under this qualified immunity. And that's just, one of the benefits of the job. So I doubt we're going to see anything with regard to anything he does as president ever landing him in jail. But Janice, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. I see we have calls from a few other areas. We're going to get to you momentarily. I want to get into this topic that I mentioned before because I want to get your thoughts on it. And I think it's interesting. We've talked about it before, but it seems to be getting worse before it gets any better. I want you to listen to this report from Crystal Moyer on WKMG.
Public health experts are sounding the alarm over the potential risks of social media usage in teen mental health. Findings from the Pew Research Center show nearly all American teens go online to engage with their peers every day, and half report going online almost constantly. At the same time, nearly 3 in 5 teen girls report feeling so sad or hopeless they can't participate in daily activities. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, it's the highest percentage of teens experiencing these feelings in the past decade. Dr. Scott Krakower, a New York-based psychiatrist, says some teens spend between 6 and 8 hours a day on screens, much of it on social media. The good news is the American Psychological Association reports that teens who cut their social media use by 50% for a few weeks felt better about their weight and overall appearance. Controlling when and for how long apps are used can play a part in creating healthy habits.
All right, now I want to bring in Jay Barnett. He is a family health therapist and a coach, and I want to talk about the impact that social media is having on the mental health of teenagers, because you just heard the report coming out of Orlando that this new report details the role that social media is playing in the lives of young people and how they manage the pros and cons, including the context of someone being part of LGBTQ or having depression. A lot of these things are the result of these mental health issues. And it seems to be, in my opinion, getting worse rather than getting better. So, Jay Barnett, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me. And as I was listening to her share those reports, I think it's so staggering that, we're not really seeing these numbers go down with the increase of suicide and with the increase of anxiety, the increase of depression. And I think one of the challenges it's not being able to manage their screen time because everyone has a phone. And for the reasons that, we've had issues that are happening in school, whether it's a school shooting or just even a parent just trying to contact their child and make sure, that they're okay throughout the day. Because we do live in a very unstable society and country. And so, I think there's a lot of angst and a lot of anxiety. So everyone has a phone. But I think what is happening is that they're given phones without having the proper tools on how to manage what they're viewing on their phones. And this is what is drawing the depression up, the anxiety when you look at these teens, because in their mind, their brains doesn't conceptualize that social media is not real. So when they see it, it's real to them. And as we know, ages 10 through 19, the brain is at a very sensitive level of just not only processing, but trying to conceptualize information.
Yeah, listen, I'm totally with you because I think when you're young, whatever you perceive is real, right? Even when you're older, honestly, most people, whether it's the news that they consume as adults, this is where they get their news. This is where they get their comedy. This is where they get just about everything. And lack of positivity in society and a lack of I guess, content that's uplifting creates these vacuums of positivity where people just get information that's not great for them. And I've seen those reports even from last year, like the CDC had one saying that the rate of depression and suicidality in young girls was on the rise. And I have two daughters. One's 18, one's 22, so not a teenager anymore, but not too far removed. And I found it to be very, very alarming. And I thought, my goodness, it's hard to be a teenage girl nowadays. And when you hear this report that's come out today, Jay Barnett, it's not very encouraging, is it?
No, it's not very encouraging at all. But I do believe that there are some ways that we can help these teens manage. And one of the ways that I love to encourage parents is just really building a line of open communication and not just having discussions around sort of heated topics. Something happens at school and the parent says, hey, let's talk about it. And by this time, the kid is just kind of, so flustered and they're kind of in their head and they don't want to talk about it because it's been the talk, of the school. But just having an open line of communication just to have conversation. And I think we don't have that anymore because, we're all busy, man. You think about it. I grew up in a time where when you left work, you left your work. Now, when you leave work, you go home to more work. And so we don't have the time that is carved out to where we can have these pockets to where we're just able to connect as human beings. And I think that's what these teens are missing. They're missing opportunities to connect in real time. So all their brain is processing is through pictures, through reels, and through little 30 seconds and 60 seconds clips. So their attention span is not there. So to even have them to sit still and to have a conversation is very challenging because their brain only processes in increments of 30 to 60 seconds.
Wow. Jay Barnett, stick with me. I want to ask you a question about teenagers and mental health and sensitivity when we come back. Folks, we're coming right back with Jay Barnett.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation on teen mental health, the influence of social media, and we're having that discussion with Jay Barnett. Jay Barnett was a professional football player, and he's now a marriage and family therapist mentoring lots of young people. Jay Barnett, I want to ask you a question because I think, you deal with this on a regular basis. And in my job commenting on the news and current events, I feel like I'm seeing an increased number of violent / deadly interactions / assaults coming from young people. And the taste that it leaves with me is that young people don't have the appreciation for life that I had at their age. And that's alarming to me, to think that we're less sensitive as we move forward by generations. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I am. But what's your thought on that?
Well, Rich, I think not only are we less sensitive, I think there is a very low level of self-awareness. I think one of the things is that these teens have a difficult time is regulating emotions. Everything is so finite, man. It's so final. I think I grew up in the 80s, and so I think we didn't have as much liberty as these teens have of speaking our minds, but we were better at managing what we felt. And these teens have all of the freedom to speak their minds, but they don't have any managerial skills. They don't have a template on how to manage. So it's like when they feel an emotion, they run with it. And I would say and encourage the listeners that emotions are sent, they're just alerts. They're not sent to be sort of the master of what we do. We are sent to sort of control the emotion by feeling it and then allowing it to pass through. But these teens have a difficult time of processing, and then they don't process. So everything is reactionary. There's no response. A response is, okay, let me think about this. As I'm thinking about this, what is the consequence? Okay, I don't like that consequence, so I'm going to make a different decision. There's no process of elimination in none of that thought process. It's like, I don't like you. I want to hurt you because I feel you're looking at me wrong, and that's a decision they make. And they don't think about it until they're in the consequence, and there's no alternative, from that. So I think we have a difficult time really getting them to understand that your decisions determine so much about your life. And this is why I think it's so important for the school system to start implementing not only, just to be teaching about emotions, but having courses and having a space where teens can understand how do you manage this and teaching emotional intelligence.
Wow. So there's a couple of things there. And I think it's probably the best answer I've heard. If people aren't following you, they should, because that was some really good stuff. I really feel like you mentioned a couple of things. Number one, I agree, emotional dysregulation is a big deal. And I know it firsthand. I have ADHD. I deal with that all the time as an adult. I can also say that I think those that don't have ADHD and are in a certain age group look like they do, right? Because they're so dysregulated all the time. And I'm thinking it's, some of it comes with maturity. Some of it comes with a lot of things. Like you said, there's a lot of freedom for them to speak their mind that you didn't have in the 80s. I grew up in the 80s too. So as you were saying that, in my head, I'm thinking, I don't know if Jay Barnett's mom was anything like my mom with the chancleta or my dad with the belt in his hand, but that kind of limited my freedom to speak my mind in many ways. And that's what was going through my head when you said that. And I thought, how eloquent. Yeah. But, and I agree that might be part of it, that lack of structure, that lack of accountability and potential consequences, where now people are living their emotion and everything is everything, and they get to overreact and act out and lash out. I agree that school systems should be involved, but I'm wondering, it's parents, right? Parents are the first teachers, and should there be some sort of campaign through the church, through somewhere, to get to parents and say, hey, look, we're going to help you teach your kids how to regulate their emotions a little bit. What's the approach?
Yeah, I think it's the collective approach that should be taken when you're talking about helping an individual foster into a space of growth, a space of healing, recovery, and restoration. And the churches are vital to our communities, but churches have changed. Schools are vital to our communities. They have changed. And I love what you of just sharing about parents being our first teachers. And I think it's important, and also important for parents to understand that you determine your child's development through the environment that you create for them. And it's okay to create an environment where you're giving your child freedom, but also help them to understand that even with freedom, there's structure in freedom. There's structure, there's order. There is a system that is in place where, and what we will call it, there's a boundary that you can express how you feel, but there's a level that you express, but then there's also a tone that you express. I mean, you can see videos all day online, man. There's no respect for teachers. There's no respect for the elderly. I mean, you see these kids, man, talking to adults, and I'm sure, like, you grew up like I did. Anyone that was an adult was Mr. and Mrs.
Yes.
Whether you knew them or not, there was
and they were going to smack you too.
Yeah, and that was just a respect that you had for them. But I think what went wrong, Rich, is that a lot of parents began giving kids everything that they never had rather than teaching kids what they needed to know.
Blame
and
the
what they
parents.
need.
I agree with that too.
And so I think there's a huge responsibility that we have to place on the parents because these kids are coming out of these homes.
Mm-hmm. Jay Barnett, stand by right there. We're going to take a quick pause. We're going to come right back. And folks, stick around. We got Open Phone America coming up at the top of the hour. And I'm going to let you know how to get in touch with Jay Barnett and this wonderful King program that he's got, KING. He's going to tell us quickly about it when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And I want to wrap up our conversation with Jay Barnett, marriage and family therapist, speaker, author. And Jay Barnett, I want you to, if you can, in a sentence or two, tell us about your program and your book by the same name, and how people can find you and reach out to you and work with you.
Yeah, so our coaching website is kjbcoaching.com, kjbcoaching.com. And so I coach a lot of C-suites, a lot of pro athletes, coach a lot of individuals. And we use coaching because there's still a stigma for some about therapy and about counseling, which is okay. And I think coaching has a unique methodology to it as because it allows the individual to kind of set some goals. But inside of that is coupled with some things that they can sort of course correct internally as well. And then the book that I wrote, Jets Heal Bro, has become a national tour. We toured 29 cities, and we're embarking on our 30th city. And
how
so
do people
what
get
we
a copy
do,
of that, Jay?
So that book, all of my books are available on Amazon. Type in Jay Barnett, and all of my books come up. And that book is for males, and it's a great journal for men. It's not a long book, but it has great prompts for men. As you know, Rich, we're not the best at being open and being vulnerable, and that's okay. But I created this for men from all walks of life to begin creating space for themselves.
Outstanding. Check them out at kjbcoaching.com. Jay Barnett, you're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you for being here.
Thank you, brother.
Phoned Across America is coming up right now with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late night talk program featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. We like to call it Open Phones Across America. It's a time-honored tradition here on this program, and you're invited to give us a call. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Happy to be with you, and I want to get into a couple of things, really kind of a piggyback on what we were just talking about in hour number 2, which was the emotional regulation or lack thereof, dysregulation of teenagers, and how sometimes that becomes violence. And I'm looking at a story, and this story is out of Chicago. Husband and wife, they were attacked after going on a date in Chicago in the Streeterville neighborhood just on Friday. And next thing you know, they were surrounded by teens around 8:30 at night, and they got kicked and stomped on and punched repeatedly. It was a brutal beating. And ultimately, the wife is injured so badly, she loses the child that she's carrying. Listen to this.
The family, they tell me that they don't believe the motive here was robbery. In fact, they weren't robbed for anything. What they did tell me is as these kids were attacking them, they yelled out that they own the streets. The family, they don't want to be identified, but they do want people to be warned that these teen gatherings can turn violent really quickly.
Please, we're just trying to go home to our kids. Leave us alone. Why are you doing this to us?
This is where Nina and her husband were walking back from date night Friday after 8:30 in Streeterville.
Everything happened from behind us. Approached to you.
Well, that they don't believe the motive here was robbery. In fact, they weren't robbed for anything. What they did tell me is as these kids were attacking them, they yelled out that they own the streets. The family, they don't want to be identified, but they do want people to be warned that these teen gatherings can turn violent really quickly.
Please, we're just trying to go home to our kids. Leave us alone. Why are you doing this to us?
Yeah, it looks like there's a little bit of issue with the audio. But ultimately, what happens here is they were attacked, and they were stomped and punched repeatedly. The woman, who didn't want to show her face on camera, she goes by Nina. She's 32 years old, and she showed a chunk of her hair that was pulled out to the interviewer. Her eye was still bruised. Her husband was also viciously attacked by the group, which held him down. Nina said this wasn't a robbery, that the teens pepper sprayed her and kicked her stomach. She was 2 weeks pregnant and found out after the attack that she'd lost the baby. She said they believe in faith and that it wasn't meant to be, so we don't know why this happened to us, but they remain faithful. The Chicago police arrived on the scene quickly and caught a 14-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl. Both were charged with 1 count of misdemeanor battery. They didn't steal anything, she said. They just kept saying, "We own the street," and that's the quote you heard us trying to play here. And they were saying things that just didn't make sense because they don't even know this woman. Chicago police are investigating, and they're also working with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office to see if any additional charges could be brought against the people that have been caught. What a horrible story to know that, you're pregnant and you've lost a child because you decided to get beat up by a bunch of kids that can't regulate their emotions and decided to show you who was boss. A bunch of savage little children who've never been told no, who freak out whenever they hear the word no, who freak out whenever they're faced with any type of consequence or authority. This is a horrible problem that we have going on in our country, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. And I don't know the answer to this. I really don't. All I know is that if we don't stop it, they grow up to be young adults that are 22, and they'll go ahead and do things like this next story. I go from Fox 32 Chicago to NBC4 in Washington, D.C. Listen to this headline. D.C. carjacking suspect charged with murder after taking SUV from hospital, crashing with the victim inside. So this woman takes her mom to the hospital. She gets out to get her mom a wheelchair and pulls up in front of the hospital. The carjacker comes along, steals the car with her mother in it, crashes the car, and kills her mother. Can you believe that? Just like these people. They get attacked. They don't know the woman's pregnant. The baby's been murdered. I didn't hear anything of a murder charge on the baby. Absolute insanity. One's in Chicago, one's in D.C. Absolute crazy town. I want to get your thoughts on this. 833-4825-337, 833-4-Valdez. Let me see. Where do we go here? We have calls from New York, Montana, Pennsylvania, New York City, and more. I want to go to Saratoga, New York. Let's go to Jane on WDGJ. Jane, go right ahead.
Thanks, Rich. Now I don't know where to start. I was going to talk about Biden and his drug.
Well, give me a reaction to these kids that are emotionally
I would like
unstable.
if you don't mind. What I'm wondering is, in today's world, where are the parents? Parents or not? I know when my daughter, because I was an abuse counselor, and all the kids, at least once a day, everybody put down their phones, and we would sit in a group, and everybody got to talk. And I would say, okay, whatever is bothering you today, let's talk about it. Let's get it out and discuss it. And, the kids started to enjoy that so much, where they knew they could express their feelings and someone was going to listen to them. And I branched out away from the state, and a bunch of us opened private child protection. And that it's so important that not everything, we have to get kids away from too many computers and phones, and just compassion. We have to teach children compassion and to care for each other and listen to each other's feelings. It truly does work, and it's an awesome experience. And
if you're not taught to have empathy, you'll learn to lack empathy.
Yeah, if you're not talking,
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like that these kids that'll stomp on a pregnant woman and kill an old lady in a car. To me, it seems like they were never taught compassion. They were never taught to have empathy, and they just go out and do these crazy things. I've never done anything like that. Why? I think the threat of my dad beating the crap out of me is what I think it was, and we knew right from wrong. But without that healthy fear, where does it leave us?
Mother abused me every day of my life, and I remember my daddy taking me off to the side and saying, Pinky, when you go out into the world, sweetie, I want you to fight for the little ones who are going through what you've been through, and you will not be a bad person, and you will help little ones. And it's the most incredible feeling in the world when you see kids sitting around and just embracing everything that everybody is saying. It really is good.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%, Jane. I think you're spot on there. I want to thank you for the call, WGDJ, Saratoga, New York. Always a pleasure to hear from you, Jane. And I want to continue. Let's go to Brody. Brody's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, listening on KDKA. Brody, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Yes, sir. It's great to hear your voice again. And I just wanted to say, I called the legacy line. Big shoes to fill. Jim Bohannon, wherever you are, I hope you're hearing this. 1-866-505-JIMBO. I miss him, and you filled his shoes just fine, Mr. Valdez.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I just hope you give me a little bit of time, and I'll get right to the point here.
Sure.
First of all, we'll talk about the lawsuit, the appeal process at the end. But today, we had some problems on University of Pittsburgh campus. I don't know if you know, in the news across the country too. And these people that are just horrible people are creating havoc across our fine country. And
who are you referring to?
I'm talking about the people that are protesting for the Palestinian and saying that University of Pittsburgh should not do any business with anything tied with Israel and all the anti-Semitism.
BDS movement. Sure.
Yeah, it's just horrible. So they just told them, they said that, 5 a.m, we're going to have 30 law enforcement agencies, and we're going to remove you immediately, and that's the end of that. So these wimps, haven't gotten a fight in their life, but they were throwing rocks at the police and everything, and they said, that's it, it's over. They're protecting the cathedral learning, and I'm glad they diffused the situation. So the Blueprint for America, look at what happened, and there's going to be a big news conference about that, but nobody was hurt, nobody was arrested, but they said, look, get off private property, nice try. Anyway, that's really good. Kudos to them. And the second part of my comment of your town hall is, I hope that Mr. President Trump is listening. I hope that the appeal process, even though we know that he's not going to go to jail at all, but he needs to pay his lawyers. After the conviction, $33 million went to him. I know he has to use it for his campaign, but don't give up on this truckload of appeal from the crooked stuff that went on in Manhattan. Okay, totally crooked, and also just the Bronx that really welcomed him with open arms. New Jersey, Wildwood, New Jersey, folks across the country. This is a bunch of BS, and we need to move forward and sort it out. Mr. Trump will be president. Just stay the course, keep his health. He knows that Biden knows that he's afraid to go against him in a debate. He said, didn't he say something, Sleepy Joe, Crooked Joe, that he wanted to face Trump sitting down? Mr. President,
sitting
Trump,
down
please.
with the ability to mute his microphone with nobody in the audience, Brody.
What side are we on here? And then Mr. President should be in a podium saying, we're not having any of this phony stuff anymore, And I just hope the appeal process goes good. You know what I'm talking about? We're going to chill to the next episode, Mr. Valdez, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Brody. I appreciate it. And that's a great song, by the way, Chill to the next episode. Brody in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Thanks, my man. I appreciate the kind words and the call. And, folks, we're going to get the rest of your calls straight ahead. Chicago, Utah, Brooklyn, New York, Brooklyn Zoo, Evergreen, Montana, Boise, Idaho, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue with your comments on everything we're talking about tonight. The phone number is 833-482-5337. Of course, shout out to the Legacy line, 866-50-JIMBO, 866-505-4626. Always love to give a shout out to the Legacy line. And I want to go to Jeffrey calling us from Hiram, Utah on KZNU St. George. Go ahead.
Thank you. Listen, I was a school teacher for 9 years. I got my teaching degree at Utah State University in Logan. Part of that was doing my student teaching in the 6th grade at a public school. About 2 o'clock one afternoon, the room suddenly erupted into bedlam. Kids were throwing things, 6th graders now, pretty big people, running around on top of the desk, knocking things over, profanely screaming at each other and us teachers. It was just insane. It was insane. And I tried to quiet them down. I said, what? And the teacher told me, no, Jeff, this is their emoting time. They're allowed to do whatever they want as long as they don't break anything.
Oh, wow.
It was part of the curriculum. And so those are the parents and grandparents of the kids that are doing stuff today.
Wow. Well, you know, what's interesting, Jeffrey, is that philosophy of letting them do whatever they want was what New York City Mayor David Dinkins used to use during riots. And he would allow them to break stuff and say, let them get it out of their system, rather than lock them up and impose law and order. And it was insane at the time to hear that was the city's approach, but that's exactly how it went. And it really is a shame to see what's going on. But you're right. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And we've gotten worse and worse with dealing with emotion, worse and worse with learning how to respect people, having compassion, and having empathy. It really is crazy. What's the weather like in Utah these days?
Well, it's going to be in the 90s for the weekend. They're talking. It's not going to be as bad as down farther south. We're not going to have 114.
Wow.
It won't be that bad.
Well, enjoy the sunshine. Jeffrey, thank you for the call. Big shout out to KZNU, St. George, the Patriot, and I really appreciate the call. Looking forward to speak with more of your neighbors out in the St. George, Utah area. And let's continue. Let's go to Diane. Diane's calling us from Chicago, Illinois, WGN. Diane, go right ahead quickly.
Hi, Rich. I wonder if what Donald Trump felt about David Dinkins when he was in New York. Did he speak out on that type of thing? But now it's so prevalent. And I went to a meeting there was an aldermanic thing, and I sometimes tried to go and take a look at what these aldermen are saying. We have 50 aldermen in Chicago, and this alderman in the Streeterville neighborhood it was, and they were mainly concerned about crime, and these are pretty well-off people and polite people, and these aldermen like to have those kind of people around because then they can just kind of spout their hot air. But he talked about right there in that area, Grand Avenue is not far from the Ohio Street Beach, and he said that the migrants are with open-air drinking and marijuana on that beach at night. See, the beach is closed at 11. So there's all of that going on. And then I wanted to say about that lady who said about, I didn't hear the whole thing because the producer was talking to me. So then she was talking about these kids that you talk to, and that when she was a little abused by her mom and her dad took her aside and sweetie, whatever. Well, what did the dad do? You know what I mean? What did the dad do with the mom? He let the mom abuse her? I mean, it's weird sounding, but what was she getting at? That she talks to people in what context? Is she a teacher?
Well, I think
or what?
she was saying that her childhood informed her future career as an abuse counselor, and that came by way of encouragement from her dad. I don't know if he lived there or not, if they were together or not. I don't have all those details, but that was what I inferred from it. But Diane, what's really sad is what happened in Chicago. This whole beating of this pregnant woman and her husband, and not even getting robbed. And it just reminds me that we are a civil society, but we're still very far from being civilized. Thank you, Diane, for your call. Big shout out to Chicago, Illinois, WGN. Folks, are coming right back. Montana, West Virginia, Idaho, and more. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with you all, we the people. 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Let's go to Charleston, West Virginia, and check in with Tommy. Tommy, you're on with Rich Valdez, WCHS.
Good evening, Mr. Valdez. I want to comment on some of the things that other people have said about the behavior of children or teenagers. And the problem is, in our society today, we are dealing in large part with the children of Dr. Spock. Early post-World War II period, Dr. Benjamin Spock, and I must abbreviate here, takes him hundreds of pages to state his case. But basically, the kid who gets what he wants, the kid who's indulged, is happy, therefore he becomes a happy, productive adult. around the same time, you had B.F. Skinner, a behaviorist, saying positive behavior, positive consequence, negative behavior, negative consequence. Well, half the country believes Spock, and half the country believes Skinner. And Spock is mistaken. I'm sorry. Obviously, his letters versus mine, no contest. Skinner had it right. You and I both grew up in an atmosphere where you were taught other people have rights too. You violate those rights, you got to explain yourself. And we've lost that in our society. And that's why you have bizarre things like this brutal assault on a pregnant woman taking place.
I
Thank
think
you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. I think you're onto something, Tommy. I really do. I feel that this shift in parenting, and over the time that I was away, I wanted to do a segment, and I still will do it. It's a very long clip of audio that I saw on Instagram. But there's something called, I want to get it right, gentle parenting. And this move towards gentle parenting by some who practice gentle parenting are criticizing it and saying that it's being confused by something else called permissive parenting, where they allow children to do just about anything under the sun. Whereas the gentle parents do have accountability and consequences. They just do it in a gentle, respectful way. And I guess the idea is nice on paper, but the gentle parenting video that I saw had a woman who has a Instagram following of people that follow her for advice and, other information about gentle parenting. And she's giving an update on what happened today with little Johnny, for example. And little Johnny attempts to enter the room that she's in, and you have to see the look of fear on this woman's face. And she's looking over her shoulder, and she's startled, and she's kind of fidgety, and she's like, oh, I thought he was coming in. This little Johnny's like 3 years old, terrorizing his mom. And the complaint that she has, the incident that she's bringing to everyone's attention, is that he hit her because she told him he had to have a timer set on how long he could be on his tablet. I'm not doing it justice. You're going to have to hear it so that you could really get the gist of it. But it's absolute insanity to me that this is going on. But it's going on. And I think your point, Tommy, in West Virginia, is apt, that too many people have bought into this idea, and we've turned a blind eye to consequences, at least those who are dealing with that. I feel like I may have still been a little too rough on my kids. But thankfully, I don't have those issues with them today. So very, very good point. Very, very good point. I appreciate it. Big shout out to WCHS. And let us continue. I want to go to Frank. Frank is in Evergreen, Montana on KOFI. Frank, go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Back in 2017, in the Caribbean, when Hurricane Maria hit the islands, and there was an island close by. It was a primate research center. It was set up in the 30s with hundreds of different species of primates. But when that was devastated, everything blew out to sea. Most of the apes did too, except the one that had the closest DNA to humans was the rhesus macaque. And of course, they could hug the ground, and then they'd find places on the leeward side of a cliff away from being blown out to sea, and they survived. But when after that aftermath, it took a while to rebuild, but they pretty much ate all the vegetation on the island. And after then, about 3 years later, COVID hits worldwide, and SARS, and the other diseases, but they did fairly well. as a group, they kind of rebounded in their population, but there was some assistance with researchers that brought pretty much fresh fruit, nuts, and berries, and what they needed in their diet. And what they also were feeding them was Purina high-protein monkey chow. And, well, they were able to develop their own immunities, and no more monkeypox and the SARS. It was not their problem, and they kept their distance from the humans. But it's something we should probably learn, because it's a diet of 80% vegetables, and about the rest is was in that monkey chow. But of course they break shells, they eat clams, etc. But they get their natural diet. But they're studying their social habits too, and they're not game monkeys or anything else. They're very healthy, and they're very
yeah. Well, in fact, they're famous. They're known for being Monkey Island in Puerto Rico. And what's really interesting, and I think a lot of people may not know, is that this was all funded by Dr. Fauci's organization, the NIH. And they fund something called the Caribbean Primate Research Center on a small island within Puerto Rico. And you're right, their main species is the rhesus macaque, or the macaca mulata. And not open to tourists, but they do their research there. And people like to look from afar to see the monkeys on the island, and it's really an interesting thing. And this is why there's so many people on the island of Puerto Rico that are very upset, because there's been so much research done there, whether it was military research, bombing in Culebra and in Vieques, the islands off the coast of Puerto Rico, or the birth control experimentation that killed many, many women back in the 50s. There's always been some sort of experimentation going on, and people figured, out of sight, out of mind. And I'm sure this situation is no different with the rhesus macaque, but that's exactly what happened. So, thank you, Frank, for the history lesson, and very interesting point about all of that stuff, including the government-funded program from Dr. Fauci's crew to operate Monkey Island within Puerto Rico. Folks, we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our late night national town hall conversation, and I want to go to Ohio on WHIZ and check in with Paul. Paul, go right ahead.
Hi, good evening, Rich. Good to hear your voice. Your buddy Dom, he done a great job last week. I have a real quick story to tell you, true story, when it comes to these teenagers and so forth. Yeah, when I was 16 years old, I came home drunk one night, okay, and I was causing a rouse. And I made a mistake. I called my mother the B word, okay? Oh, wow. Keep in mind, that my father was a southpaw Gold Glove boxer. Now, this man dropped me. Yeah, and he never... throughout my life, I can never remember him laying a hand on me other than that time when I did that and disrespected my mother, And, I think a lot of what's wrong with these kids this day is they don't have a strong father. Because if my kids were out in that street doing what they do right now, what you was talking about tonight, my father never had that. But, he was the type of guy, he grabbed me a couple times. Now, I respect and love this man. I worked with him for 30 years. I raced with him for 18 years, So he's dead and gone now. But, I loved my father. And I think a lot of what's happening in this world is the families are not sticking together. They're letting these kids be spoiled brats. I have a Raising Cane chicken place over here across from me. These kids have these cars these days. I don't know if you've heard those, and I'm going off the wall a little bit here in the weeds. But they just get in that parking lot and rev them up, and bang, bang, bang. I don't know what they call those these days.
They sound like machine guns.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And they're doing donuts in the parking lot and stuff. The disrespect is just terrible these days. And I just think that the family, the mother or father, you better take hold of these kids and say, we're not going to have it. And that's what I want to say, Rich, tonight. I love getting on your show because I think you have one of the best shows, on all the programs that I listen to.
Well, thank you, Paul. And listen, let me tell you, I think you hit the nail on the head here. I think this is, in my opinion, the family is the cornerstone of society. And the father is the cornerstone of the family. Now, I know some moms are going to say, hold on. I'm not saying the moms are not important, right? Dad's the cornerstone, the mom's the top stone. I'm not discounting women at all. I'm just saying that I think I've seen it time and again, that when fathers are absent from the home, we have all sorts of problems for boys and girls. That, some boys grow up not understanding things. And the things I'm talking about are like rudimentary things, right? You just mentioned something. You said your dad never laid a hand on you until you disrespected your mother. Now, we can make the argument that your dad was teaching you to respect your mom. We can also make the argument that you crossed a line when you insulted your father's wife. And I would say I would probably go with that one because I just think, right, biblically, I think, the Bible says leave and cleave, right? Leave your parents and cleave to your wife so that the two can become one flesh, right? Paraphrasing, but that's the idea. And I've grown up with this concept, right, that your wife is number one, your children obviously come next, and your mom gets put on the back burner as you grow up and create your own family. And there's debate over that. I saw a video the other day where they were debating that very concept. And, one guy comes out and says, hey, I was raised by a single mom, so my mom's always going to come first. I can always get another wife. I can't get another mom, right? And I thought, wow, interesting concept or a different way of looking at it. But your mom's going to die, right? And, I mean, so is your wife, but you're not supposed to make a life with your mom. You're supposed to make a life with your wife. Even after your kids are gone, your wife is your responsibility. Right, and I think even, again, thinking biblically, using that as my worldview here, the idea of the church is that there is a bride and a bridegroom. And it doesn't say that there's children. It doesn't say that there's a mom. So I think that's the order that things should go in, right? Your wife, your children, and then your mom. And I would submit to you that I think that's what, your dad was doing, was defending his wife's honor, who happened to be your mom. I don't know if I'm right or I'm wrong, but those are my thoughts, Paul.
Yeah, can I finish that story real quick? What happened to me the next day at school?
Yeah, go ahead.
I went to school, and, my face was busted. It was scratched up a little bit. And I had a couple teachers, come up and say, Paul, what happened to you? What happened to you? And I told them. And they were like, well, do you want us to do something? I was like, no. I said, I disrespected my father and my mother, and nothing that happened from that, Rich.
That's right.
That's how
what
it
were
was
they going to do?
That's how it was back in the 1980s. I graduated high school in 1982. So
Wow.
That's how it was back then.
Good for you, Paul. Well, I really appreciate the story. It was a good story, and it gave me a chance to talk about that story that I wanted to share. So it's a good segue for me, too. Paul in Zanesville, Ohio, WHIZ. I appreciate it. And, folks, stick with me. We're coming right back. The rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Is Prime Minister Netanyahu playing politics with the war? I don't think so. He's trying to work out a serious problem he has.
That is Joel Barboso Biden. Now, there has been a confirmation from Israel, as you may have heard, that 4 more hostages that were kidnapped on October 7th of last year have been declared dead by the Israeli military, including 3 older adults seen in a Hamas video begging to be released from Hamas custody. The announcement earlier today puts new pressure now on the Israeli government, because they're saying, look, the hostages are dying and are being killed, whatever. And there's pressure from Biden. There's pressure from the media. There's pressure from everybody on Netanyahu to engage in a ceasefire. That's been the case from the beginning, right? They haven't allowed or wanted to allow Israel to handle their business. They've kind of said, no, you killed enough bad guys. It's time. You just stop. And, of course, that's not the case, but they want it to be the case. Let's go to Paul, Boise, Idaho, listening online, richvaldez.com. Paul, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call, Mr. Valdez.
Yes, sir.
With an S. Also a patriot as well. I know you are. You share yourself every time you're at work, and we can hear the patriot man that you are.
Very kind.
Yeah, I'm pretty upset at finding another 4 hostages that were dead, and it seems like the list just keeps on getting longer and longer. And the Israelis are playing by the game, by the rules of war, the way they're supposed to. And, Hamas just doesn't. And, the only way I can see out of this is for them to have a complete and utter surrender, Hamas, that is, surrender, and turn over all living hostages and show where the deceased ones are, so that they can be given a final resting. And until that happens, it reminds me of the deck of the Mighty Mo in Missouri. When the Japanese had to sign over that they had lost the war to the United States of America. And until then, the war wasn't really physically over.
Yeah.
And,
well, Paul, I feel you on this one. And I agree. Israel has to get their job done and get it done very quickly. All of the killing has to end. I'm with everybody else. We want it to stop. And, of course, you can't stop until you've gotten rid of the problem known as Hamas. I get that. Let's hurry up and let it happen. God, it's terrible what's going on there. Paul, thanks for your call, brother. America, hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless. I'll be back with you all tomorrow. I am Rich Valdez. Hasta la próxima.